We are absolutely delighted to be jointly hosting this event with our great friends at Adyen, Adyen, which is the global financial technology of choice for many of the world's leading businesses. We officially announced our partnership at the back end of 2022. We absolutely love working with Lucy, Joseph, and all of the team at Adyen, and it's a real pleasure working together. In terms of the lineup for this evening, we have a really fantastic lineup of speakers. You might have noticed there's been a slight change in the lineup because, unfortunately, Claire has been struck off by illness. But we want to say a big thank you to Clem and Nafisa for stepping in this evening, which is going to be even better. So I'm absolutely delighted to introduce Joe, who's our first speaker and is going to kick us off this evening.
Hi everyone, my name is Joe. So I'm from Adyen, part of our Unified Commerce Enablement team. In today's presentation, I'm going to speak to you a little bit about what Unified Commerce is and deep dive a little bit more into payments data. So as Jimmy mentioned, Adyen is a financial service platform which helps merchants process their payments from start to finish. So everything from actually processing payments to eventually paying those out to our merchants. So I thought it would be great just to do a bit of an intro in terms of what Adyen is before I dive into Unified Commerce. So Unified Commerce, what does it mean? There's so many buzzwords out there, omnichannel, etc. So I think just to describe it, what it means for us is that merchants who have an interaction or some sort of presence in store or online, or even through other multiple channels like call centers, for example, are merchants that we classify as Unified Commerce merchants. Now, typically what we'll find is that merchants will start in that single platform. Traditionally, they'll start moving into that kind of omnichannel setup whereby they have interactions in store, they have interactions online. But what we'll find is that when it take a look at the data and the actual transactional data itself and data in terms of customers, that tends to be quite siloed. And that's purely down to the fact that there are legacy platforms, legacy systems, which limit the fact they can't actually share that data across. So what that means for customers is that they have a bit of a disjointed and not a great actual experience. For example, things like buying online and returning in store. So when we talk about Unified Commerce, it really is a focus on the back end. So focusing on kind of systems which are in place, so for example, order management systems, ERP platforms, customer data platforms are really there to kind of make sure that our payment data really supports supplementing that and basically providing a bit more of a visibility and single visibility on shoppers. So when you take a look at Unified Commerce, what we try to focus on is three main focus areas. The first one is around experiences, which is really focused on how do we make better customer journeys. So as I mentioned before, things like buying online and returning in store is one of them. But of course, you may have seen in the last couple of years, things like payment links, the use of self-serving checkouts, you may have seen in Uniqlo, for example. That all bundles under the kind of bucket of experiences. The second is insights. And again, I'm going to deep dive a little bit more into insights throughout this presentation, but that really is more understanding on shopper insights and deep diving into who is the customer behind the actual payment itself. And then lastly is engagement, which I'm not going to touch upon too much in this presentation. It really is focusing on how we boost interactions and personalization for shoppers, typically through things like our payment hardware. So things like recognition and shopper loyalty, as well as charitable donations, are all under our engagement package. Cool, so I'm going to jump straight into insights. And with shopper insights, what I want you to take a look at this screen here is a bit of a mock-up of what a typical point-of-sale merchant looks like. Typically, what you'll find is that there's a big percentage of unknown shoppers because, of course, many of us have done this before. We go into a store, we just want to be in and out. We don't want to provide any details. We don't want to interact with anyone. We just want to get our goods and go. But they do have a small portion of known shoppers. And typically, yes, it's down to the fact they have a loyalty program with them or a quick search on email address or phone number to allow them to search them up really quickly on the point of sale. So as you can see, that's not great. It looks like about an 80-20% split here. How Adyen's payment data really does support and I guess unlock those customers is through a couple of different points. Now, of course, name, email address, very obvious, unique identifying points for shoppers. very dependent on shoppers actually providing this information to them with consent, of course. But what I want to focus our time today here on is the two that you see, which is called the alias and the par. Now, the alias, essentially what we call card alias, is a unique identifier that we create at Adyen for each individual 16-digit or 15-digit card number. So, for example, if I use my card online or I use my card in store, I will be having the same alias and essentially being able to recognize me as a shopper across those different channels. Then you have annoying people like me who love to use Apple Pay on my watch and my Apple Pay on my phone or Google Pay on my phone. And essentially the whole point of those payment methods and wallet methods are obviously to mask my identity and mask my PAN. So for each device that gets created, each device that's used, a new card number is then created. So this is where we use what's called a PAR, or most commonly known as a payment account reference, which is a scheme-driven identifier that basically we get back from these schemes for the overarching account, right? So my bank account number and sort code in the UK isn't changing. Of course, my cards change over 10 years and my phones change over the space of time, but that remains the same. So by using these identifiers, what we're trying to see here and what we do end up getting is more of an understanding and more visibility on actual shoppers. And so this crowd of nice avatars here starts to become a little bit better, and you start recognizing these shoppers. Now, what that looks like from a merchant side, and this is a very basic mock-up of a database, by the way, no database looks like this. But what you see obviously from a merchant side is that you have a lot of information on your transactions, right? You have the date, you have the channel, of course you have the products, which is also super important. And in some cases, you may have the name and email address, right? Of course, if the customer is providing that and consenting to that information being passed over. But what I want to draw your attention to is, of course, the transaction number 2 and number 3, where on app and on a website, of course, customers are providing more data, right? They want their goods to be delivered to their home address. You need to provide a confirmation of email, for example. So they're more inclined to provide this information, of course, consent to that data being given to you as a merchant. So let's just remember this, and let's take a look at what we see today in terms of customer profiles. If you take a look at Max, for example, we can see today that his order count is 1. Currently, what we see his lifetime value being is 100 euros, and we only see him as a website shopper. We then took a look at the other shoppers, which are the unknown shoppers who haven't got any sort of name or email address associated to them. And all we're seeing is there's 3 shoppers, 3 transactions, and this is the total amount. We don't know nothing about the transactions themselves. But when we start to add in payment data, what we're able to do is start linking those shoppers together, right? So really understanding those blind spots and essentially associating transactions to known shoppers. So if we take a look at transaction 1, where we didn't have a name, we had no email address, but we take a look at the shopper identifier, A123, we see A123 is also used by Max. And so therefore, Max actually done a transaction in a store a few months back, and we're able to link those two together. So really understanding that kind of in-store shopper who never made themselves known or never presented themselves as part of that transaction, right? And as part of that customer profile. I also do want to draw attention to the last 2 transactions, right? Regardless of whether the fact that we have the name or email address, I think this type of data is still really good for you to have, right? To do anonymous marketing or anonymous targeting, because we're still seeing here that C789, a shopper uses this with their MasterCard and then also use it on their MasterCard with Apple Pay as well. So if we take a look again back at the customer profiles, we now can see that Max, his order count increased, of course. His lifetime value is also increased. But I think most importantly, what we're now seeing is that not only is he a website shopper, but he's also an omni-channel shopper, right? So he's shopping across multiple platforms. Not only is he fixed on shopping online. So essentially what we want to do is turn payments into profiles. There are various different ways in which Adyen can support in actually getting this data to you. One of the first ways of actually doing it is for using webhook notifications, which is, I'm not going to go super technical on everyone here, but by providing basic information about the transaction after every payment that goes through. So we can send that to you as merchants. You can consume that data. You can, of course, analyze that data and assign it towards your customer data platforms yourselves. The second way, however, is that we do have various amount of products which offer out-of-the-box functionality, right? And the whole purpose of this is that we remove that technical burden, meaning that you don't have to start sorting and analyzing profiles together. We will do what I just showed in that example around creating the actual profiles. So we will stitch together your point-of-sale transactions and your e-commerce transactions into one. into a file in which you can then eventually push into your own kind of customer data platforms and enrich your customer data, right? So the whole purpose of that is to simply ingest it and associate to your own CRM profile IDs and loyalty ID numbers. And eventually, hopefully what you can do with that data is actually execute on it, right? You can use it for marketing purposes. That's been mainly the use case that we've seen today from merchants, that they really want to use it for marketing. But as I was saying to you earlier, right, there's various different cases for verticals around fraud and how to stop loss prevention, for example. But essentially, these are just a few examples of how you can use it today, right? So for paid media or just understanding more customer lifetime value of your current shoppers. Now, I spoke a lot about customer lifetime value and customer profiling, but I think also one of the good examples that we've seen is that payment data actually supports operations as well. And I think this is a really nice example from one of our merchants who came with us with a bit of an ask, which was to understand more around their shopper behaviors in their kind of vertical, right, which is the hospitality and entertainment space. So Merlin, not too sure if you, for those who don't know, Merlin have amusement parks and theme parks across the world, and particular in the UK, they have the likes of Fort Park and Chessington. They came to us and said, you know, we really want to understand more around guests once they enter the theme park. We don't know how long they spend in the theme park. We don't know what their favorite rides are. We don't know what they're purchasing. Do you have any sort of information to help us? So I took it upon myself and had a nice day out in Fort Park, and it was great. I had a great time. And this doesn't mean anything to you guys, but I'll walk you through exactly what this is. But essentially, these are all my transactions. These are all my transactions from the day in Fort Park. And there's a mixture here of point of sale and food and beverage, applications, online, kiosks for fast track tickets. And I just want to highlight, right? So it doesn't matter what systems you're using. You could be using point of sale solution, an online solution, a call center, or a food and beverage application. Adyen being that kind of payment platform and that single platform allows us to have that visibility on you as a shopper. And so obviously, yes, I use my same card for the purpose of the presentation and for the purpose of the example. But it's a really good way to actually start building that customer profile itself. And so what we did with this, we actually turned it into a bit of a payment timeline, right? So what we're able to use is understand exactly what my steps were, where I transacted throughout the day. So if we take a look at my ticket purchase, which took place on the 15th of July, you can then see that I visited the theme park about just over a week, just before opening time, so very keen to get on and rise, as you can see. And I made subsequent payments throughout the day, right? And I want to highlight the point around, I just didn't use my card. I used my iPhone, I used my Apple Watch, I used contactless, chip and pin. I tried everything to try and break the system, but apparently it just doesn't break. But not only am I able to see where I'm spending and what I'm spending during the day, but it gives me a bit of an approximate time of how long I spent in the park, right? Which is what Merlin wanted. They had no idea how long someone spends in their theme parks. And so the next slide gets a little bit creepier and a bit intrusive, but you can start to map out a little bit of my actual timeline and my actual whereabouts on the day, right? So in Merlin's case, not only did they use that data for looking at my profile and building my kind of CRM data itself, but they also took a look at this and thought, okay, well, Joe's going in here, he's going to the second point, his third point, he's buying a fast track ticket. Why don't we put more kiosks in between 1 and 2, right? So not only can they make decisions around customer, but more also around operations. And again, this is very specific to hospitality and entertainment, but of course, it's very much replicable in around retail and other verticals that we process in. So that's a nice example of how you can actually use it in practice. Now, I kind of want to end it on, we want to partner with data. When it comes to partnering data, I think it's really important to consider things like data protection and privacy. GDPR is huge, of course. And I think our advice to that is always, be very transparent with your merchants about what you're using that data, your customers about what you're using that data for. If you want to do things like card link loyalty and using it for recognition purposes, as long as you're super transparent, of course, you check it with your own legal teams, that's the best way forward. But of course, any questions around data or how Adyen works with merchants today, we're more than happy to share. So me and my colleagues are here, so feel free to reach out to us during the event.
Any basketball fans in the audience tonight? None? Or one? Any of you basketball geeks? I can make most of this stuff up, which is fantastic. And as I used to be a strategist working with Jimmy, he's kind of used to that. Normally at this point in the presentation, you kind of talk about the fact that this is why you should be listening to me, because I have great creds in this space, and I actually do have a very unique background. So actually, there's a lot of stuff that I can talk about that is really relevant to this evening's presentation. So my first degree is in astrophysics. But I can legitimately say I was the worst astrophysicist ever to come out of Birmingham University. But that's another story. I used to be a second-hand car salesman. My first job out of uni was as a second-hand car salesman, and you learn a lot about human behaviour as a car salesman. I remember when people used to come in and trade in their second-hand cars to buy new. The first thing that we did, or the first thing that I got taught to do, was yes, look at the car and bodywork and stuff, and yeah, whatever mileage. But the first thing you do is you open the boot, and you check to see whether the boot is tidy or not. Right? And if it's tidy, it means that they've actually taken the time to clear the car out and they mean business. They want to sell the car. We spent time with them. If they hadn't cleared it out, you know what, we kind of spent a bit of time with them, but then really passed them on to the next salesman who didn't look too busy. And you learn a lot about human behavior and actually behavioral targeting, which is what I do a lot of now. The last two, I'm not sure whether I should talk about, but I once did come, but I will anyway. I did once come second in an LGBT kickboxing competition, which was a surprise to me and my girlfriend, because I hadn't realised I joined an LGBT club, and I was beaten by a 6'4" German woman. So kudos to me, I think. And I once did deliver a keynote presentation at the Sexy Email Conference in Amsterdam, actually. And I remember when Michael rang me, very heavy Dutch accent, and I thought he said, "Would you like to come and speak at the Sex Email Conference in Amsterdam?" And I went, "Yeah, I'll pay my own fare." And I got there and I had to talk about emails instead, but never mind. Back to this evening's topic. Just one thing to bear in mind, in particular as we're here at Red Badger, and the importance of actually thinking about that when you set off on a project, or when you think about the experience you want to deliver your customers, or some of the decisions you're making around product, actually you're never going to think about all of the things that you're never going to think about, right? There's no way that you can do that. So when you begin on these projects, and when we started looking at how we deliver customer experiences and how we use data, it's important for us to think about the fact that actually there will be intended consequences of what you're trying to do, and they're the things that you try not to change during the course of the project, but there will be unintended consequences. And so it's about actually how do you build out a platform or a project that takes that into account, so that you can be agile enough to change direction at any moment in time, depending on what's happening in the economic climate, what's happening with customers, what's happening with technology, or indeed what the agency is trying to sell you in that 6 months to get their targets. I used to work for agencies, so I know what it's about. So why are basketball players tall? And what does that mean to do with customer experiences, engagement and stuff? So let's go back. It's 1891, it's Springfield, Massachusetts, which for those of you who don't know, that's the US. And if you don't know, that is worrying. But more specifically, it's December 1891, and it's bloody cold. And you've got, I might swear on the odd occasion, but I am from Yorkshire. So this is Dr. James Naismith, who was an academic at the Springfield College. And it was his responsibility to keep the 20 or so young men in his charge fit. But it was so cold at that time that they couldn't train outside. So he thought, well, what can I do with these 20 young lads? The one thing he did have was an indoor gym. So I thought, well, I'll take them inside, and we can make use of that facility because it's relatively warm. And the two other things that he had as well was he had that ball, which was it's a football shaped ball, not it's soccer for our US audience. Is there anyone in from the US? No, great. Oh, great, there you are. I see. I won't crack the next joke then. And then he had these peach baskets, yeah. And originally he kind of got them to split them into two teams. They had to put the ball into opposition basket, and they got a point really easy, right? So what he did was he got the janitor in, and they said to the janitor, "Can you attach that basket to that ring that's on the outside of the balcony of the gym?" And that ring is 10 foot high. And do you know how high basketball hoops are now? Oh, come on, I've just given you the answer. 10 foot, right? So unintended consequence of that warming more people up inside. And that's where basketball comes from. And actually, that's the end of my presentation, right? Because that's why basketball players are tall. You know, he introduced some rules because the first time they ever played, it turned into a mass brawl because actually there were no rules, and I think someone had a dislocated jaw, there was bruises, there was black eyes. He introduced some rules, and over time, basketball has evolved to that amazing sport that it is now. And yes, so basketball players are tall as a result of that and have consistently got taller. This is from thehoopsgeek.com. Everyone is a bit of a geek, right? So it's a really good website if you're looking for this kind of material. If you're going to the sexy email event in Amsterdam, it's a different website. But so getting tall, but are they getting tall? Because if you look what happens in around about the 80s, right, statistical analysis might be a little bit skewed here, but in general, players weren't getting as tall as they were going to be. And why is that? So let me introduce you to the 3-point rule. If you know about the 3-point rule. So what happened, there's actually, the concept started quite a few years ago, but someone in the NBA, which is where really it needed to take off for it to be taken as a rule across the world, is they wanted their version of the baseball's home run, right? Because they thought that was a really exciting thing that happened in baseball. So they kind of decided, well, what could we do in basketball that would introduce another level of excitement to the sport? So they came up with this idea of a 3-point line, which is, and apparently it's pretty arbitrary, that they just drew a line about 20 feet away from the hoop and decided that if you're on the other side of that line, you would get 3 points for your shot. If you're inside the line, you'd get 2 points for your shot. And that was to make the game more exciting. But it had this unintended consequence of the fact that if you look at the accuracy of shots within a basketball game, on the left-hand side, you can see that if you're really close to the net, chances of you getting a basket pretty high. But as you move away from the net, actually your accuracy doesn't drop that much until you're actually quite way beyond the 20, 25 feet away. So actually, if you watch a basketball game, you'll see that people now kind of realize that they're on the line. If they take a step back, they get 50% more points, but their shooting accuracy only drops by about 10%. So it's kind of worth doing. And as a result of that, you didn't need to be tall, right? Well, you need to be tall, but you didn't need to be a 7'2" player to get all the points. You can now be relatively short and 6'5" or something, which is still kind of up there. So if you look at the numbers again, so if you're tall, the majority of your points come if you're close to the net, 85-inch players, high. But if you're shorter, you get these points away from the net as well, right? So I think it's worth bearing that in mind. So that leads me to this idea that when I create customer experiences, loyalty programs, recognition programs for the brands that I've worked with, both agency side and client side, it's about, as I talked about earlier, thinking about the intended consequences of the behaviors you want to influence that are consistent and core to your brand and to your business model, but have an open mind about the unintended consequences. But also think about this as being a continuous evolution. So in the same way that if basketball, and actually the majority of sports have evolved over time, so will your customer experiences, your loyalty programs, the way that you interact with customers and the technology and how you use technology for your customers. To bring this back to just a little bit of reality. So I have been fortunate for the last 4 or 5 years to work for the Natura & Co company group, who the 4 brands in there are Aesop, Avon, The Body Shop, and Natura in Latin America. And I was fortunate that I started my career there, or my time there working with the Aesop brand. And they asked me to come in and look at their CRM vision and the staff that they needed, and then look at the loyalty program, or as we called it, the recognition program for Aesop customers. And Aesop is a very particular brand. I don't know whether you've been into one of the stores, but it's an amazing experience. And we would never do anything as brash as have a points make prizes loyalty program. Not that that's not the right thing to do for a lot of brands. So Aesop, it wasn't right. But what we wanted to do was to create this idea of how we could recognize really strong behaviors that we felt were really strong and attuned to the ESOP brand. And I call these our axes of recognition. In the end, we didn't use any of these, but not any of these. We didn't use all. we didn't use all of these, but because I'm a astrophysicist, failed astrophysicist, I like to keep things relatively simple, and I don't want it to be rocket science. So we kind of just based our idea around these, what, when, why, who, and how. So what are the key things that we wanted to influence in terms of or recognize in terms of customer behavior? So for ESOP, obviously it was important that we wanted customers to buy lots of our product, but because we were known as a gifting destination, so we wanted to recognize in particular the fact that we had customers that only shopped with us once a year, coming up to gifting, so coming up to November, December. So they'd come into our shops, come online, and just buy gifts for their friends, families, and work colleagues. So we wanted to make sure that we treated those individuals in a particular way. Yes, we tried to get them to buy more, perhaps for themselves, gifting themselves, but we also talked to them about actually what are the other gifting opportunities throughout the course of the year, so that you can carry on being a generous customer, being generous with your gifting. For ESOP, tenure was important. So again, because we kind of treated our customers as guests, long-standing guests, so people who visit us on a regular basis over a course of 5-10 years, we wanted to make sure that we recognized those individuals in a particular way as well. Even if they only just came in once a year and bought a particular product that was their product favorite, which I'll talk to in a second. So we did a very, very simple thing that we looked at customers who'd come to us consistently for the last 5-10 years. And very old-fashioned, we actually had a brand book that was created in ESOP's 33rd year. Odd numbers are very important to ESOP. And we just did a very simple thing, which went, thank you for being a customer of ours over the last 5-10 years. We just sent them the book with a thank you from our chief customer officer, who's the only person actually who's been with the brand for the whole 33 years or 34 years now, 35 years. No call to action, it was just a thank you. And it went down really, really well. NPS scores just went through the roof with that particular segment of customers. And of course, they talk to other people as well. And then we want to talk to customers about what they bought as well. And this is where getting people involved with the brand was really important. So when we had a reformulation of our parsley seed antioxidant serum, which is quite a mouthful, that's a very, very great product for us, and I use it all the time. And it's not bad because I'm actually 85. So ESOP is not renowned for asking for customer feedback, but at this point we kind of thought, we wanted to show that recognition. So customers who've been loyal to that product, who've been buying it for 4 or 5 years, we brought them into the product development process. So we had a formulation that we'd created, and we weren't probably going to change that too much, but we got some of these key customers in. We got them to try the product because it's actually a slightly different texture. We took some feedback from them, made some slight modifications. Then when the product was launched, obviously, they got to find out about the products first. They got the samples. They were the first people to be able to come to a digital or a physical consultation on the product, speak to one of our consultants, use a product in combination with their other products. And because the thing that we were worried about was actually losing those customers because of the new formulation. But in fact, we had the opposite effect, and we actually, within that particular base, the product was even more popular. So I think that sometimes you kind of need to think about keeping things relatively simple, because you're not always trying to put a man on the moon like I tried to do, and successfully. One of our projects actually in the 3rd year at astrophysics was to try and discover where the center of the universe was with a bit of equipment. And the way you do that is you calibrate your equipment to look for hydrogen. And so you calibrate your equipment by saying, well, what's closest to us in terms of has a lot of hydrogen? And of course, the sun in our solar system has a lot of hydrogen. So the first thing that we did was to try and find the sun using our equipment. Yeah. Good luck with that. And again, so I talked about points make prizes. And when I first joined ESOP, we had big agencies coming to us and saying, look, this old-fashioned way of doing rewarding about points making prizes, and it's about cards and points and economic rewards, and it's a sense of entitlement. That's old school, right? You guys need to be in this new world of affinity loyalty, which is all about belonging to the brand, and it's about that human interaction. It's not about the card. It's about an appreciation of who you are. And you know what? That, in some instances, that makes sense, right? So for brands like Aesop and Mulberry, it makes perfect sense, because I think that's where you play. But other brands like McDonald's or Nando's or Tesco's, right? So Tesco's at the moment, they play really well in that point, because actually in terms of the current economic climate, they've got lots of levers that they can pull in that part of the world. So again, any agencies that come to you kind of say, this is the space you have to play in, take it with a pinch of salt, because that's something that, you know, people like me are trying to sell you. So it is about shifting mindset with customers. It's about, for Aesop in particular, it's about how can we give customers, how can we get them to buy more from us? We wanted to move that to actually, how can we show these customers that we truly value them as individuals? And ultimately, because actually we do have a CFO and to please in a group, to then buy more. Because obviously, you know, I often get talked about, you know, are there different metrics you should be using when you're looking at recognition programs, your CRM programs, the value of your personalization programs? Yes, right. So NPS, customer satisfaction, are all important, but ultimately, that's the number that the CFO is going to want to read. And NPS, you need to make that link between those fuzzy scores into something that's a bit more tangible for him and the shareholders. So I talked about some of those things, that unintended consequences. So free coffee. I don't know if you remember a few years ago when Waitrose created their loyalty program. You could go into any Waitrose store, you didn't have to make a purchase, you showed your card, you got a free coffee. And I don't even know, but there's a bit of a, in the papers, a lot of Waitrose customers are complaining because you had all these people turning up with Tesco's carrier bags, not making a purchase, but they had a bloody Waitrose card, right? So you know, again, human nature, you have to think about the fact that, you know, humans behave in their own particular way. We have a problem at Avon where we've got a huge tranche of our reps. So a majority of our business comes through reps still. Where we've got these reps who don't behave like reps. They don't engage with our rep campaigns. They don't buy in bulk. They kind of just buy products once a month. You know, a shower gel a month or a lipstick every 3 months. Does the lipstick last about 3 months? I don't know. I don't know. Mine do. Well, why is that? Well, and we look back at what was happening. And of course, when you become a rep, you buy a £30 starter kit, but you get £100 worth of product. I'll become a rep, right? So again, it's understanding that customers will try and exploit those loopholes in your programs. And then now we're using data to try and work out, well, actually, how can we understand and identify those people as quickly as possible so that we can give them, not stop them being customers because we want them to be customers, but give them the most appropriate communications, not rep communications, but customer communications. And then I'll happily share this piece of work, but there's a piece of work that was done in the States about customers who become VIP customers. The level of expectation in terms of customer service goes through the roof, right? So if you haven't strung together all of your customer experience, all of your customer service propositions, your channels together, actually that falls flat, because now the VIP is going, but I'm a VIP. I don't want to wait 30 seconds. I don't want to wait a minute. I don't want to wait 5 minutes on a call center. What do you mean I have to pay for returns? I'm a VIP customer. So you need to make sure that the whole ecosystem is right for those VIP customers when you're doing that recognition piece. And I talked about that constant evolution in basketball, and I think that's something that, you know, worth bearing in mind. That, you know, and I use ChatGPT. I actually went on to ChatGPT yesterday and just going, oh, just give me the, you know, top 10 rule changes that have influenced basketball over the last 100 years. And of course, he didn't mention the 3-point rule. Oh, what's the point? So then I rephrased it to make sure you include the 3-point rule, and it did. But as you can see, right, this thing has evolved over time. And I guess one thing to bear in mind in terms of this evolution thing is that plans change. And in the words of Mike Tyson, right, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, right? So just bear that in mind. And hopefully that wasn't too poor next presentation for you guys, right? So thank you very much. I'd be really happy if you kind of linked in with me. That's the front copy of my book that it will be published in October. Put your name down for one.
We forgot to do intro slides. So my name's Clementine. I'm a principal product designer with Red Badger.
I'm Nafisa. Sorry. I'm the girl who whooped when Gianfranco said, is anyone from America? So that was me.
Also a UX designer.
Also, yeah, I should probably say that. Senior UX designer here at Red Badger.
Okay, thanks everyone for hanging around for the last talk. It's going to be short, and it is, we're going to do it with a bit of help from Sherlock Holmes, who once wisely said, data, 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 you can't make bricks without clay. So we've been hearing a lot tonight about collecting data, ways of doing it, tools to use to do it, what you can do with that data, what it tells you, and how you can use that to focus on new opportunities, identify opportunities, and do all the good things that we genuinely do want to do for our clients and our customers. Sometimes, though, we find ourselves often working from a point of, well, there's nothing really there yet. So we might be working on a product that doesn't exist yet. We might be working on something even more abstract where we haven't even identified the specific problem that people are trying to solve. So while we have all of this wonderful data available to us and ways of collecting the data that we definitely love and we definitely need, and we use to make kind of data-driven design decisions, we also need to remember that we're still dealing with like version 1.0 human. And when we think we're starting from a point of nothingness, really, we know quite a lot about this version 1.0 human already. And when we think we have no data, all we really need to do is just kind of look around the room, and we shall find what we seek. So I know that we have some friends of Red Badger in the room. Hi, friends. We also have some people here who might not be so familiar with how we work. So this is a kind of general team shape that we tend to go for. You'll notice it's very definitely cross-functional, but it's also kind of a partnership. So we have a blended team, so we can bring discipline expertise, but also business expertise that can help us on our way. In this particular context, though, when we're thinking about data and insights, if we look at this in a different way, we're really just sitting in a room full of these version 1.0 humans. So we feel like we have nothing, but we can actually be quite safe and confident in the knowledge that if we just look around us, we have a lot of human insights already available to us. We can draw on all of the life and human experiences of the people who we're working with in the team, and we can use those to build human-centered hypotheses that we can then take forward and validate through human-centered research.
So this is where I come in. Right, so, should I go over here? The first thing we do to try to understand humans is by talking to them. So what do we talk to them about? We ask them a bunch of questions so we can find out about the product and what it is that we're trying to build. What kind of people do we look for? The truth is, it doesn't really matter as long as you go out and start talking to them. As you can see here, we have Chris talking. Well, he's not very talkative, but if you know Chris, you would know that. But here he is being forced to talk to someone. And you can see that he is chatting with a Nando's customer, and just from doing guerrilla testing and going out into the wild and chatting to people, we were able to get, well, he was able to get a lot of feedback. We're also doing this at the moment with a luxury retailer, going out and chatting to people just on the street, right outside their store, and seeing what they have to say, and just showing them the website. Some people haven't seen it before, and they just talking to them very casually has given us a ton of insights. So what else do? We do desk research, and that might be a competitive analysis, but also, you know, we're just talking about the team and how we work in a blended way. But in terms of this, what this is, lightning demos, I don't know if you guys have heard about that, but it's just a workshop that we ran with one of our clients, and we just asked everyone in the team to come up with one competitor. And each person, I think there was 15 people in this workshop, they came with one competitor, and even though everyone came up with different people, there was little to no crossover of people talking about different businesses. And you can see kind of where in the tiny Post-its, where the pluses were in each company. And we're able to make patterns from that because we're humans and that's what we look for. So this is an example of what you might do if you don't have any data.
Watching what humans do, people watching is actually one of my favorite things. But watching what humans do is a really valuable way to get information about the type of people who might be interested in using your product. If you don't have anything and you're looking to build a physical experience or a digital experience, just kind of looking at how people interact in similar adjacent kind of environments and spaces can tell you a lot about who your potential target audience will be or could be. So it's something that we do a lot of kind of all the way through the journey. It's not something that you just do at the beginning to find out kind of what people want, but we kind of like to observe and see people in the natural environment. The natural use of product is really important for understanding, specifically for like interface designers, kind of how people will engage with something, what they need. Can they use both hands at the same time? Are they trying to do something else? Are they distracted? Are they in a peaceful place? It makes a really big difference to how we would design something. So doing contextual research and actually getting that context from the environment is a really valuable thing for us to have access to. This is actually a shot from some observational research that we did with one of our clients a few years ago, Fortnum & Mason. We spent some time with them building out a new e-commerce platform. And one of the really interesting things about this kind of version 1.0 human is the fact that we do like patterns, as Nafisa said, and we recognize those, but also we tend to impose certain patterns across everything that we perceive to be similar. So there's lots of laws of UX and stuff like that, but there's one in particular called Conway's Law that quite a lot of organizations unintentionally do, and that's when you replicate your org structure in your consumer-facing products. And that doesn't always make sense to the people who are using your products because they don't know that on your business floor, this department sits next to this department, but you may have transposed that into your digital experience somehow. So understanding how people move through a physical space can really be meaningful for us to understand how they're also going to move through that digital space that we're building.
Right. So looking back, when we first started, we had no research, we had no data. And now, having talked about a couple of different methods, we know that we're able to generate a load of insights. So version 1.0 human, using our products, we can see that there's a ton of patterns through research. We've done this in the past with an insights board. So you can see a bunch of Post-it notes on a board. And as you can see, there's clustering happening here. Again, finding patterns to figure out where similar pain points are and finding opportunities through clustering. So from this, we've figured out what are our quick wins, what can we do quickly, and from that, with our client at the moment, we've built a roadmap. So we've gone from nothing to a plan.
So the moral of the very short story is that starting from a blank page is really, really hard. And when you don't have ideally all the data that you would like, it doesn't mean that you're stuck. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have any direction. We just feel like when we're surrounded by humans, and that's who we're trying to design for, then we can always find a way. Yes or no?
Case closed.